What's up guys, it's Kristen here today with my top 15 books of 2015. Now, I read a total of 62 books this year, which I know in the world of booktube is not that much, but for me that was pretty good. And I only just started this channel a few months ago, so I'm really excited to talk about some of the books that I read earlier in the year that I really loved and haven't had a chance to mention yet. At number 15, I have The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This was one of my earlier reads in the year. It is a historical fiction set in Amsterdam in the 17th century, and it follows 18-year-old Nella, who receives a very ornate dollhouse, which is an exact replica of her house, as a wedding present. But it gets very mysterious when the dollhouse starts mimicking things that are happening in her life, and then it starts to actually predict things that are gonna happen. This is definitely a very slow burning novel, great atmosphere, mystery, and it's one that really stuck with me all through the year. Number 14, I have Shades of Grey, no, not that one, by Jasper Fforde. This is a science fiction book set in a world where the people can only see certain colors, and depending on what end of the spectrum you can see, that will show your place in the society. It is a very humorous, very bizarre, and also a satirical fantasy book, which makes it very unique. Teen, I have Fangirl by Rowell. This is a very popular book, especially here on BookTube. This is the story of Kath, a college student who writes fan fiction for a Harry Potter-like series, but the book is also more about her relationship with her twin sister and how when they go to college they start to drift apart from each other and how difficult that is on Kath. This is such a heartwarming, feel-good contemporary book, but also so relatable because obviously Kath being a massive book nerd like all of us. At number 12, I have the classic science fiction work 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. This story starts 3 million years ago when we are still walking around as apes, and an alien civilization plants a device that will jumpstart our evolution. And then the story jumps to 2001 when we are almost living on the moon, which kind of shows how dated the book is because people in the 60s assume that we would be doing that by now. And when they discover the same alien technology planted on the moon, it leads to a space mission to Saturn. And if anybody has seen the movie, I recommend reading the book because it fills in a lot of the holes. At number 11, I have Percy Jackson and the Battle for the Labyrinth. This is the 4th book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. This is my favorite book in the series. I love the world of the Labyrinth. I thought it was action-packed. And finally, we get some progress between Percy and Annabeth. Coming in at number 11, I have Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science for Remembering Everything by Joshua Foer. In this, the author took 1 year to train to compete in the US Memory Championships, and it's part of his experiment to show that anyone can be a memory champion and remember vast amounts of information. You just need to learn the techniques, because scientists theorize that we can actually remember everything that has ever happened to us and that our brains work like a computer, constantly recording every experience. But in today's world of technology and iPhones and iPads, we just don't have a use for our memories very much anymore. This book was so funny and fast-paced, but also a great amount of information in it, and I have used some of these memory techniques already. Number 9, I have the famous Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This is such a divisive book. It's you either love it or you hate it. Obviously, I loved it. For those of you who don't know, it is the story of teenage Holden Caulfield, who has just been kicked out of another boarding school, and he spends a couple of days wandering around New York and complaining about how he hates anything that is phony. A lot of people think he is just this whiny, depressed teenager, but I felt like I really connected with Holden. I also find it fascinating that 3 murderers, including the man who killed John Lennon, have claimed that they did it after reading Catcher in the Rye. This one little book seems to have so much power over people, and it would have been higher up on my list, but I just am so in love with his short story collection that nothing can really live up to it. For number 8, I have The Devil in the White City Murder, Magic, and Madness at the Fair That Changed America by Erik Larson. This is a non-fiction book about the 1893 World's Fair that took place in Chicago, and it tells the story of the main architects and all of the struggles that they went through in order to put on the fair. But then the devil part of the title is all about America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, who was using the fair as a device to kill more people. I found it did drag at some parts, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I am so excited for the movie adaptation that is supposed to come out starring Leonardo DiCaprio. My number 7 is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. This is the story of Billy Pilgrim, who has become unstuck in time, meaning that he will randomly time travel to different points in his life. He often goes back to when he was captured as a prisoner of war in World War II, which is the part of the book that is actually autobiographical because Kurt Vonnegut did experience this. This book is very short, closer to a novella. It's very humorous and I believe deceptively simple, because it's one of those ones that after reading it, you really think about what the meanings were supposed to be behind all of the things. At number 6, I have The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. This is a very famous feminist science fiction work. It is about an ambassador named Genly I who is visiting a planet called Winter because they're in an ice age, and he is trying to make them join a federation of planets. But the planet Winter is very unique in that everyone who lives on it is sort of a hermaphrodite, meaning they can spontaneously change their gender, and they only mate with each other at certain times of the month. And I love how Le Guin was trying to open up this dialogue about what a world would be like if we didn't have these entrenched gender roles. So now we are at my top 5 books of the year, my absolute favorites. And coming in at number 5, I have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a World War II historical fiction novel following a blind French girl and a young boy in Germany. You get both of their separate points of view, but as the novel progresses, their stories start to weave together. And this is probably one of the most beautifully written books I have ever read. The author goes into such amazing detail, but it's not boring, it just makes you feel like you're actually there experiencing it. And of course, it being a World War II novel, it is completely heartbreaking. I didn't love the ending, which is probably why it's not higher up on this list, but it's still an amazing work and I recommend it to everybody. At number 4, I have The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. This is a magical realism book about a girl who is born with wings. But I love that the book is actually more about the women in previous generations of her family, going all the way back to her great-great-grandmother. This book is so atmospheric. For me, it felt like a mixture between Practical Magic and The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood, which are some of my favorite movies/books of all time. At number 3, I have East of Eden by John Steinbeck. It is an amazing classic of epic proportions following 2 families over many generations, mostly set in the Salinas Valley in California, which is where Steinbeck himself was from. Steinbeck based the Hamilton family on his own family, and he actually jumps in as a narrator at times. And you can just tell by the descriptions of the valley and the family that it is really his love letter to his home. And when you read about the other family, the Trasks, they have some of the most vile, horrible characters that you have ever read, but also some of the most endearing ones. I felt so connected to all of the characters immediately reading this, and even though it is 600 pages, I honestly flew through it. 2, I have Empty Mansions by Bill Deadman and Paul Newell Clarke Jr. This is a non-fiction book, and it is the true story of one of America's richest heiresses who, when she died, left over $300 million in her will that was fought over by estranged family members, the nurse that took care of her at the end of her life, the banks, the IRS, anybody who was anybody wanted her money. The heiress's name was Hughette Clarke, but I actually love how the book goes all the way back to her father who started with nothing and ended up as a multi-millionaire, and this house on the cover was their mansion on Fifth Avenue. And you hear about Huette's very eccentric life, and she also lived rather reclusively. And so in the end, you really don't feel like anyone deserves to get this money because they're all such horrible people. Even the heiress herself. This book really opened me up to wanting to read more nonfiction because you realize that sometimes life itself can be crazier than any fiction story that someone can come up with. So for my #1 book of the year, this should be no surprise if you've ever watched my videos before. It is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I now consider this my favorite book of all time, not just of 2015. This is essentially a murder mystery about a group of college students in Vermont. The only difference being that the narrator tells you on the first page that he murdered someone, and he tells you who it is, he tells you who he did it with, and that he seemingly got away with it. So for that reason, people always call it a whodunit instead of a whodunit, because the entire book you're just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out what on earth would lead this group of students to murder their friend. Donna Tartt's writing is just beyond beautiful, and the mystery is so amazing. Every time I thought I knew where the story was gonna go, it would turn in the complete other direction. Every character in this book is completely unlikable. They are horrible people. And because the book is from the perspective of these murderers, you start to side with them, and then you start wondering what is wrong with you that you're rationalizing the things that they've done. It was just brilliant. I cannot wait to go back and reread it and see where I missed all of the little hints along the way. And of course, I am dying to read her other work, The Goldfinch, which won the Pulitzer Prize last year, because I cannot imagine it getting any better than The Secret History. So there are all my favorite books of the year. Again, a lot of them I read before starting my channel, but the few of them that I do have reviews for, I will link them down below. I would love to hear if any of you guys have read some of my favorite books, or what were some of your favorite books that you read in 2015. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!